Hey guys, welcome to the Crush Method show. We're so excited to dig in today. My name is Amanda Kaufman,
And I'm Chris Lavelle.
and we're talking about psychology today. Now, I'm going to preface this whole thing. We're not mental health professionals.
We're not ists in any way, shape, or form.
That's therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists,
Nope.
in case you were wondering. But as a coach, we do spend a lot of time talking about mindset. And specifically, when we're talking about psychology, we're talking about our tendencies and our thought patterns around what it is that we're thinking in a given moment and how we're really responding to our environment and the prevalent thoughts that we tend to have. So I'm excited to dig into this because mastering your own psychology is a massive, massive piece of mastering your own performance.
Oh, absolutely so. I mean, the thoughts in your head will lead you to success or failure more than any other thing that goes on in your life and day.
It's so true. It's not so much the circumstances of what is happening in our lives as our response to those circumstances. And so much of that is really tied into our thoughts and our beliefs around what is actually happening.
Oh, yeah, the stories you tell yourself.
And so I think one of the biggest things that has helped us in our journey is learning to see our thoughts. And I think there's a big distinction, a big difference between experiencing and participating in a thought and seeing that it is a thought.
Yeah, we're not talking about mind reading and things like that. We're talking about being consciously aware of your thoughts and where those thoughts are leading you to think and act in certain ways. And then sometimes consciously changing those thoughts to lead you in new directions you want to go in or away from things you don't want to do.
So here's a model that can really help with that. Often when we are experiencing challenges or we're feeling that feeling of stuck or aggravated or frustrated, any of those kind of negative feelings, those feelings have been triggered by a thought.
Sure.
And so if we can first observe that we're having a feeling,
Become aware of it, yeah.
we can then start to look at, well, okay, what exactly am I saying to myself that's triggering that ongoing feeling? Because believe it or not, it's our emotional state that is going to have the biggest effect on the decisions that we make in a given moment.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Let's be honest. We're emotionally driven creatures, but the emotions don't just happen. They happen as a result of thoughts.
Exactly. So when we're encouraging you to look at your thoughts, like what thoughts are you having? It requires step one, stop. Like you have to just stop whatever activity you're doing because it's really difficult to see how you're thinking when you're in motion.
Well, if you spiral into these thoughts, it's really hard to analyze them and think about where's that coming from? How is that serving me? That kind of thing. So that's why Amanda's suggesting stop and become conscious, aware of the thoughts you're having and the way they're making you feel.
The second piece is to really center. And my favorite way to do that is to simply just breathe. What happens when you do that is you can shift your attention and focus from the thing that is either aggravating or depressing or, and pull it into your own body and thinking about the breath. And you happen to be oxygenating your body as well at the same time.
Not a bad thing to do.
It frees up mental resources when you do that.
Absolutely.
So it'll allow you to really step back and observe what that thought pattern really was.
Okay. So when you do that, how much judgment do you find yourself putting on yourself in that case?
That's such a great question because usually it is judgment that we're experiencing. So we're judging that, oh, well, that didn't turn out the way I thought it should.
Or I should have done that differently. Or, oh, I'm not as good as this person over here or whatever.
And it's when we're getting into that should thought pattern and shoulding all over ourselves.
Shoulding all over yourself right there.
That's what keeps people the most stuck from a psychology standpoint is the thought pattern is it should be different than it actually is. Yeah. So when you find yourself in a lot of judgment, either of others or more likely of yourself, there's probably just some thought patterns in there that are recurring and reinforcing that keep reinforcing the same negative feeling and then therefore driving the same negative behaviors and then you get the same negative outcomes. So mastering that psychology and being able to say, wait, hang on a second. Am I in a state of should right now? Right? Am I observing a situation and saying, hey, this should be different than it is? We tend to put all our energy into that gap between what is and what should be. and instead of saying, okay, based on what is, what do I want to do?
Absolutely. Making a conscious decision in that case, as opposed to a decision based on, I don't know, feeling bad about yourself or bad about a situation might be one way to describe that.
Exactly. So one of the practices that I've had for years.
You're really good about this too, by the way. Yeah.
So yeah, just like this is a foundational cornerstone kind of a habit for me, is journaling. And it can be just, on a little piece of paper.
Yeah, a little notepad, a sticky note.
A sticky note. It doesn't have to be this big formal process, but it's journaling. And
now, when you say journaling, what are you talking about there? What do you mean? Because that could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
I know. And for a long time, I resisted doing it because I thought, oh my gosh, I don't want to spend 20 minutes writing like this big, long thing. Yeah. And what it is really is very simply using the language processing centers of the brain to process through and think through the thought patterns. So often when we're in that merry-go-round of the thought pattern, that negative reinforcing pattern, we just kind of rehash the same program over and over and over again. So I use journaling as a bit of kind of a twofold. One, it's a pattern disrupt. So I'm disrupting the pattern of the thought.
Changing your thoughts a bit.
And two, really starting to articulate the actual thought that's going on. Because I think what can sometimes happen is you get trapped in the feeling and you don't really hear the full thought that's reinforcing the feeling. Our brain just kind of fills in some of the blanks and accepts that the feeling is there and reinforces.
Especially if they're negative thoughts.
Exactly. So by using the language processing centers of the brain, what I'm basically doing is I'm disrupting that thought pattern and forcing a different neural pathway for processing the information. And, so therefore, when you journal, you might be writing, you've got some kinetic physicality to it, and there's a different voice that happens with those thoughts as you drive the clarity. And it doesn't take a lot of time. Like I've had massive movement in my thought patterns with only 5-10 minutes of journaling.
Okay. Well, so it's not something that you have to really overthink, is what I'm hearing. It's something that you want to use. You want to give yourself some time for it, per se.
Yep.
But it's not something where you need to really build a defined structure, other than just to force yourself to analyze and think through the thoughts instead of being subject to them. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's exactly what you're hearing. And, I've been using Brendan Burchard's High Performance Planner for the past...
you really like that one.
Yeah, and I don't get paid to say this. I'm just telling you, I really like it. One of the reasons I really like it is he asks some probing questions. And so you can just respond to those questions, which is a form of journaling.
Good prompts. They're good prompts.
They're good prompts. And I find that it really helps master the psychology again because it's asking the right kinds of questions. I always say that the value of having a coach is that a coach is going to ask you new questions because you keep asking yourself the same dumb questions.
You get stuck in your loop, absolutely.
Exactly.
But they ask you new, open-ended questions that cause you to go new directions of thought. And since we were talking at the beginning of this episode about changing your thoughts, that's very apropos. Exactly.
So I would be remiss if we were talking about psychology in the context of performance if I didn't also talk about psychology in the stance of mental health as well. Yeah. Very unfortunately, I have lost friends. I'm sure if you're listening or
most of us have.
We've all been touched by people that are dealing with mental illness and challenges, and maybe have even dealt with it ourselves. So I just really want to encourage you to, if you're having a hard time disrupting the pattern and it's just not getting better, that's the time to call a therapist and
to call and get help.
Get that help. And you can start with your general practitioner doctor and just explain what's going on. They've done tons and tons and tons of studies that show that working with mental health professionals can improve the situations like depression or anxiety. Sure. And I think there's a lot of not just stigma about mental health in our society, but I think there's a lot of I'm going to self-diagnose. I'm going to Google search, internet search, and help fix myself instead of seeking a professional.
And some of that's for shame reasons. People often feel ashamed, like they're broken or they're not good enough, and they don't want to make that public. Full disclosure, guys, the reason we advocate for things like this is we've both been through that, and probably will be through it again. We're human. You're human. And it's part of that human experience, unfortunately. But it doesn't mean you have to go through it alone. And I think that's really what Amanda's talking about here.
That's what I'm saying.
Don't go through it alone when you feel like something like that is going on and you're struggling. Certainly use the things we recommended here if you find them helpful, but don't be afraid to go seek additional help, professional help if need be.
Exactly. And, we do talk to a lot of coaches. So coaches, if you're working with someone and they're not able to move past traumas, if they're not able to really get to that place of that functioning, recognize that coaching is all about the future. It's all about paving that way for the future. So if you find a lot of your conversations are going back to diagnosing past hurts, diagnosing past
and they're stuck and not functional beyond
thought patterns, exactly, that's a signal that you should be referring them to a mental health professional in their area.
That's what they focus on, is getting people functional. Whereas we coaches, we help them stretch for the future.
Exactly. So that's what we had to say about psychology. I hope you loved this episode. Be a cool friend. Share it with a few of your friends. And we'll see you next time on the Crush Method Show.
All best. Bye, guys. Mwah.
Hey there. Thanks for tuning into this week's The Crush Method video blog. I'm Amanda Kaufman.
And I'm Chris Lavelle. We loved having you here.
Be sure to subscribe to receive more goodies in your inbox every week and share with others you know who are eager to learn more about building their coaching and expert business.
And don't forget to leave a comment below to share your own experiences to inspire and lift others on this journey.
And check out our podcast on iTunes called The Crush Method Show so we can join you on your commutes and workouts.